What's happening is that what the left can't control, they want to destroy. And so the left has tried to control the Supreme Court inappropriately. That is to say, beyond just the usual appointment power that the president, of course, rightly has. They tried to control it by leaking the Dobbs decision prematurely, which, of course, not only had a dangerous effect on civil society, but if you were any of the 6 conservative justices, you continue to have extra physical security. So now what they're trying to do with this act by the acting president, Mr. Biden, is to destroy it.
Welcome to the Michele Tafoya podcast.
Well, that's Kevin Roberts. He is the president of the Heritage Foundation, which has been under fire for Project 2025. Ooh, it's so scary. People are trying to demonize this list of ideas, a wish list of conservatives, like conservatives are such evil people. They're not. And I think you'll find out that Kevin Roberts is among the most sane and down to earth among them. He has a lot on his plate. He's been a professor. He's at Heritage. He's got a podcast. He's done a lot. His feet are on the ground throughout the nation. He's talked to a ton of people. We are going to talk about the border. We are going to talk about Kamala Harris. We are going to talk about the upcoming convention for the Democrats and what that may look like. Lots of stuff on the table. Oh, and this Supreme Court suggestion by Joe Biden. His take on that is one I haven't heard before. And it was really surprising. So you want to stay tuned for all of that. Kevin Roberts is next. Folks, economists warn that massive tax hikes could devastate your IRA and 401k account as the stock market braces for impact. With inflation on the rise and global uncertainty looming more than ever, it is clear why central banks and savvy Americans are turning to gold. Now, if you haven't had your eye on gold, you might want to take time to make it a priority. I'm urging you to call my friends at Priority Gold to find out how they can help you diversify your savings with physical gold and silver. Call 1-800-405-GOLD or visit prioritygold.com/golden for a free gold info guide. Plus, see if you qualify for free shipping and storage. Experts agree that physical gold is one of the best ways to fortify your savings, no matter the economic climate. Act now to get your portfolio working for you while the market is golden. Call 1-800-405-GOLD to speak with a gold specialist or visit prioritygold.com/golden to learn more. That's 1-800-405-GOLD or prioritygold.com/golden. Kevin Roberts, you are many things. Should I call you president? Should I call you professor? How do you like to be addressed?
Dad and husband.
Okay,
the best roles ever.
I couldn't agree more. Well, yeah, I appreciate.
I know
my
what you
husband.
mean.
I know, and you know what I mean. Kevin, it's great to see you. There's so much to talk about, and I want to just jump right to the elephant in the room, because everyone's pointing to the Heritage Foundation as the sort of the architect of Project 2025, which the Democrats are making sound so scary. And it's now just become a talking point. I see people all over the news media saying, all I can say is one thing, Project 2025. And they're making it sound like a very scary thing. They're also gluing it to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. So first of all, what is Heritage's role in Project 2025?
Well, thanks for the question. Our role in Project 2025 is the same role that we've played for the conservative movement since Ronald Reagan was elected in 1980. And then, as you no doubt know, Michele, we wrote Mandate for Leadership, which was a group of policies and recommended a few hundred people to President-elect Reagan and Vice President-elect Bush to go into their administration. What we've done every 4 years in service to any elected official who is interested is suggest policies and recommend people, knowing that, of course, the elected officials are the bosses. They're going to make those decisions. What I think has been different this year about Project 2025 is that given the stakes of the country right now, I really do believe we have a very limited amount of time to devolve power from Washington and give it back to the people. We at Heritage decided we would involve every conservative group we could in this. And so 110 organizations have been part of this. In fact, a few have joined in the middle of all of this nonsense from the left. We had a goal initially of having 10,000 people join a personnel database that, of course, includes people who are interested in serving, but that's ultimately going to be up to President Trump and his administration. We have 18,000 as you and I sit here, which shows that what all the left has done in trying to demonize this project is amplify the interest that Americans have in saving their country. We've taken a page from the left playbook, and they don't like it.
When you say you've taken a page from their playbook, what would you compare it to something that the left does in these kinds of, instances?
Well, as you know, I've been fighting the left mostly as an academic my entire career. I was the lone history professor who was conservative and Christian on a couple of faculties. And what they have been doing for that 25-year period is using organizations like the Center for American Progress, using other nonprofits with truly radical ideas. They obviously have the right to believe those and advocate for them, right? But they're truly radical, way out of step from just common sense Americans. And I realized when I became president of the Heritage Foundation 2.5 years ago, that in addition to the longstanding work that we've done, that we needed to up our game. We needed to go out to the center right in America, not just organizations in DC, and invite regular, everyday Americans to be part of this process. And so we've taken sort of a page regarding the organizational structure of the radical left and trying to cohere the right. You might have noticed in your career that conservatives don't always speak with one voice. And so our motivation in this was to unify the movement as much as we could, to be of service to any administration, not just the one that might take office in 2025, but in 2029, 2033, to expand this to state capitals. In essence, the page we've taken from their playbook is to organize the political right in a way that's never been so cohesive. And I think that's why they're so apoplectic about the whole thing.
Well, and that may be true. The last time I saw the presidential candidate Donald Trump mention Project 2025, I think he was asked about it, and he said, I've looked at it. I haven't endorsed it. There's some scary things in there. I think he used the word scary or extreme. So he seems to me to have distanced himself a little bit, and that may be for political purposes. What is the relationship between the nominee and Project 2025?
Well, on one level, it's good that President Trump and his campaign distance their campaign from anything else, right? I mean, they're trying to win an election. Also, legally, it's important for people to know that Project 2025 is independent of any candidate. We've put this together for any candidate to lean on. But secondly, to the heart of your question, our relationship with Mr. Trump and his advisors remains very good. It's one where we're not coordinating at all. I mean, what he said, of course, is absolutely true. And yet, if you think about the Trump campaign being in one lane, the RNC and their platform being in another lane, Project 2025 is in this really big lane. And I say it's a big lane because it's a representation of the entire conservative movement. The left has lost their minds because they say, oh my gosh, Trump wants to do some of the same things in his policy objectives, Agenda 47, that the RNC wants to do, that Project 2025 talks about. Yes, there's no doubt about it, because we're all conservatives. It doesn't mean that it's sort of this masterminded plan. And I think I was really grateful to President Trump and his most recent comment about the project, in which he identified the real problem, which is the purposeful distortions and mischaracterizations of the project by not just sort of leftist activists, but by people in the media. Yeah. And I'm really grateful, as I passed along to them, just one quick point, we've gotten 27 fact checks in the last 2 weeks on those mischaracterizations, some of them by left of center outlets. I mean, none other than CNN and the Washington Post and USA Today. And I think more of that is very helpful in letting people realize the substance of this project is something that most Americans agree with.
Well, and not only that, it's like you said, this is not part of the Trump agenda or plan. This is a group of conservatives putting together a wish list, basically, and saying, here is, I've heard it described as a buffet of offerings of things. And by the way, we can help connect you with some people to help implement this. But this is in no way, like I said, I've seen I've tweeted a lot about this because they are making this a boogeyman, right? And they are making conservatives boogeymen. So, I've been told that because I'm pro-choice, and I say pro-choice with exceptions, I'm not rah, go get an abortion. That's not what I mean. When I say I'm pro-choice, I believe that women should have a choice. to a point. So, but they say that I'm not a conservative. So I've had people tell me that. They said that having Amber Rose on the stage at the RNC, she's not a conservative, she's promiscuous, she's pro-choice, yada, yada. Is the tent wide enough for those of us who don't agree with everything in Project 2025?
Of course, and I'm really glad you identified that issue, because there's no issue other than abortion that has received more mischaracterization as it relates to Project 2025. And I think the metaphor that used buffet is great. You know, my wife's favorite metaphor about the project is, Kevin, she says it's like the menu at Cheesecake Factory. I mean, you can never eat it all, right? And as I have mentioned to many friends who might have a difference of opinion on one issue or another, you know, whether it's abortion or something else, guys, even I don't agree with every word in Project 2025. Unanimity of opinion is not what we're after. What we're saying is, if any elected official wants some policy depth, some policy substance in a particular policy lane, here's one set of suggestions. Mm-hmm. It's, in other words, it's the work that we do at public policy organizations all the time. I, as a very serious pro-lifer, have no problem being on your show. You're a reasonable person. You're someone who cares about America. And point number two, to your point about Amber Rose at the RNC convention, what I see is not even just an enlarged conservative movement, but an enlarged movement of people who just want common sense. Whatever ideological label they want to paint themselves with, what they're saying is tomorrow, they want to wake up in a normal country. And the last 3.5 years, however you would describe the Biden-Harris regime philosophically, it has not been normal.
At the very heart of our democracy lies a principle we hold sacred: free speech. Free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. But here we are in a digital age, and discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being muffled or overshadowed in mainstream narratives. And that leaves a lot of people feeling like they don't have a voice in the conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where Wealth Protection Research steps in, armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech. They are committed to giving a voice to those who have been silenced. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts, and these are the voices that challenge the prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. It is a free report that highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get it completely free by texting the word IDEAS to 76626. That's IDEAS. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, act right now. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy now. One of the most abnormal things about this White House, the Biden-Harris White House, has been their handling of the border. We have seen millions and millions of people cross illegally. We don't know how many gotaways there are. Some of the people have been on the terrorist watch list. We're at a time of really high, when Christopher Wray sits there and tells you that all of the red flashing lights and red flags and buzzers and bells are going off at the same time, that's worrisome. I want to go back to a moment where Kamala Harris actually did go to a very sanitized portion of the border and talked about what she was going to do there. So this is a little trip down memory lane, but let's go ahead and play this audio for our audience.
I am meeting with a lot of folks, and the work that we have begun is the work that is going to be ongoing. There is no question, and I said this from the very beginning, that our approach to this issue has to do with a commitment to a long-term investment, and it has to be a commitment to consistency. The United States has to be consistent. There were times when we were more engaged and we saw good results, less engaged, and we can see where the work and the partnerships then deteriorate. So I am committed to ensuring that we engage in an active way on the root causes, on addressing the cause and effect, and also being partners in the Western Hemisphere, understanding that we have a responsibility, and if we ignore that responsibility, it will visit itself upon us in a very domestic way.
Okay, I wanted to play the entire thing because I think it's really important to hear how there's absolutely no answer in all of those words. There's nothing that references policy, solutions. She talks about root causes, cause and effect, engagement, non-engagement, but there's no substance there. How big of a issue is this border crisis? Because in my mind, it's massive.
It's one of the two biggest issues facing this country. And by the way, I also think it is one of the two issues that will determine the outcome of this election. So much so that the one little bit of substance that the vice president gets at in that clip is the very end, that phrase that it will visit us in a very domestic way. Intuiting what she means there, because the whole thing is rather incoherent. It has visited us in a very domestic way. The borders are. And she was appointed to that by her boss, even though the media is now trying to say that she wasn't. The border czar has directly contributed to more than 10 million illegal border crossings since they took office, just in the last 3.5 years. And nothing against those people as human persons, other than the fact that they've broken the law. They have completely upended hundreds of American communities. They've had a direct impact on the increase in crime rate. They've had a very, I think, negative effect on the American economy, which was already very weak. All of that to invite the other second issue here, Michelle, and that is the economy. You and I both know when we go to the gas pump and to the grocery store, we pay rent or our mortgage, that this is a very expensive country to live in. That was not the case when Kamala Harris took the oath of office as vice president. If Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance and common sense candidates prosecute the policy case on the border, on the economy, on the lack of public safety, not just in inner city cores, but in suburbs, they are going to win this election handily. We might have some things to say about the incoherence of the vice president or some of her personality. I can tell you from spending more time with voters on the ground than most people, they actually don't care. They want to hear the policy contrast on the border, on the economy, and on public safety. If that happens, then I think we're going to be smiling in January.
How clear of a message do you think that Trump and Vance have on that? Because you and I both know sometimes they can be disciplined and sometimes they can lose their discipline. And what you're talking about is attacking policy, not personality. And I would agree 1,000% with that, because the policy failures alone, it wouldn't matter so much that Biden was old. If his policies were fantastic, we'd be like, woohoo. Now they've substituted in a younger, more attractive candidate, and they think the policies are just going to somehow be better. This to me is craziness. And it just demonstrates how people are voting for personality over policy in some instances. So we do need to get back on that track of pointing out the failures of this administration and how it could get even worse in a Kamala Harris White House. So how do you think this ticket will respond to that mandate to stay disciplined?
I think they're up to the task. Evidence of that in the last few days would be Senator Vance at some campaign events that I saw. And when I'm looking at these, I'm looking at them through the lens of a philosophical conservative policy guy, not someone with allegiance to either party. Then I see someone who's really homing in on the hypocrisy of Biden, Harris saying they're going to take on the border, but actually purposefully implementing policies that have done exactly the opposite in a way that frankly hurts American lives. It hurts public safety. It hurts the economy. I think we will see soon a sharper message on the economic contrast. Mr. Trump has a very strong policy record to run on there. And where they really need to bring this home from a policy point of view, it's what we do at Heritage in our policy work, is connecting the dots for Americans. Americans very smart, very forgiving people. But what they don't forgive is when people intentionally initiate policies like the Green New Deal, like a lawless southern border, and it has an effect on their economic security as well. If that messaging stays in that zone, then I think those of us who are conservative policy leaders are going to be very busy next year and beyond, helping those elected officials at their request implement their priorities.
So if you're a regular listener to this show, you know I love the people at besthotgrill.com. They make the incredible Solaire infrared grills that heat up in just 3 minutes to searing heat and make the juiciest grilled food you will ever taste. But, don't take my word for it. Try before you buy with the Solaire Demo Rental Program. For only $47, you can use a Solaire infrared grill for 2 weekends and the week in between without a salesman breathing down your neck. Test its versatility with steak, chicken, fish, pork, veggies, all the foods your family enjoys. Inspect Solaire's quality construction and experience firsthand Solaire's hot and fast performance. At the end of the demo, just wipe it off and put it in the box for a UPS pickup. Solaire makes it so easy. And then you'll get a coupon for $47 off any new Solaire infrared grill. The Solaire Demo Rental Program will convince you why Solaire is truly the last grill you'll ever buy. Learn more about the demo program and these amazing USA-made grills at besthotgrill.com. That's besthotgrill.com. Solaire Demo Rental Program at besthotgrill.com. There's sort of a new issue that's come to, it's been born into existence by I will call him the acting president, Joseph Biden. He wants to reform the Supreme Court. And we're not just talking about a package of ethics. We're talking about term limits and so forth. Obviously, he can't get this done. He's got a limited time still in office. Changing the Supreme Court so radically would require constitutional amendments and so forth. And there just isn't the time. It's been pointed out by a lot of analysts that this issue has been planted as a way to sort of galvanize support for Kamala Harris around the Supreme Court and unpopular decisions. It's so factually, I think, misrepresented. If we look at how many unanimous decisions have been brought to bear by this Supreme Court, we would be going, oh, they really do seem to, rule in a way that is fair and that is even. So what's going on here?
Well, as I've sort of become fond of saying about my real job description, I think for a living, I read between the lines in Washington, D.C. for people who don't have the burden of working here. What's happening is that what the left can't control, they want to destroy. And so the left has tried to control the Supreme Court inappropriately. That is to say, beyond just the usual appointment power that the president, of course, rightly has. They tried to control it by leaking the Dobbs decision prematurely, which, of course, not only had a dangerous effect on civil society, but if you were any of the 6 conservative justices, you continue to have extra physical security because of threats on your life and the lives of your family members. So now what they're trying to do with this act by the acting president, Mr. Biden, is to destroy it. And destroying the court is basically the objective of this plan. I'm going to make a prediction, though, Michelle. I think that there is a greater wedge politically between President Biden and Vice President Harris. And I think Mr. Biden, by proposing this right now, is worried about his legacy. But it is very unpopular among Americans to go fiddle with another institution they respect, even though the left, of course, has tried to undermine the Supreme Court. You think about the decisions the court made just this term, they're wildly popular. And so I think it's going to have a boomerang effect politically on the vice president. And I can tell that this is the case because her campaign is not talking about that issue. So as ridiculous as it is, I think there's a silver lining to this plan, which is that the left always overplays their hand. They've done it on their mischaracterizing of Project 2025. They're now learning that most of the tenets of that project are popular. And they're now about to learn that with the other campaign being focused on the border and the economy and the lack of public safety, this Supreme Court idea is going to be perceived as being too radical by the centrist voters they need to attract.
You sound very confident about that, and I wish I shared that. Maybe I have been seeing too much of the other side and their reactions to things. They're very loud. They're very loud on social media. They're very loud in front of cameras. They own most of the legacy media, the mainstream media. So hearing that side again and again and again, support some of these ideas, support some of these, what I think are radical ideas, and trying to normalize them, men playing in women's sports being another. And I feel as though they're having success in convincing people that you're just a really nice, empathetic, kinder person if you allow for more people to come into the country. They're not illegals, they're humans. If you allow for this disorder, if you allow trans women to compete against biological, you're just a more virtuous person. That seems to have taken in some portions of the population. Maybe I'm overstating it. I hope I am. What do you see?
Look, I know why you say what you do, and it's not that you're wrong. I just think that for you and me, for example, who spend our professional lives focused on the news, we hear and see more of that and sort of the negative effects of that attempt to normalize ridiculous behavior than most Americans. As part of my job, I spend more time outside DC than I do in it, visiting with everyday Americans whom you also know, Michele. And what I know, and frankly, what I'm counting on, is a group of people you can always count on. The American people always get it right. They have been turned off, for example, by the opening ceremony of the Olympics. I mean, even people who are not ardent Christians were offended by the representation of the Last Supper by the Olympic Committee. They ought to be turned off, and they are today, by video of the boxing match with someone who's presumably a man just beating the heck out of someone as a woman. As a dad of 3 daughters, I just find it reprehensible. The point that I'm making here is that even though we see those kinds of images and the attempts by the left to normalize those things, as well as normalizing the upending of the Supreme Court, the American people, both in public opinion polls, but also in more active ways, how they're behaving politically, socially, culturally, are telling us, we really don't care what label you want to attach to yourself. And actually, most of us don't even care what you do in private. But when you're trying to normalize behavior that isn't just sort of odd, but even more importantly, is dangerous to us and our family and our friends, we're going to draw the line there. And I think that's something, for example, President Trump has been really eloquent about in the last few weeks, saying, guys, we just want to return to normal. We want to wake up in a normal country. I think that top line message is important, not just politically, but more importantly is, and I'm likely to say this, as we go about our daily lives, let's just immerse ourselves in reality. And I think Americans will find that very appealing.
So right at the heart of our democracy lies something that we hold sacred. That is free speech. That free speech is the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. But in today's digital age, these discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are either being silenced or they're being overshadowed in mainstream narratives. And that leaves a lot of people feeling voiceless in the conversations that are critical to our financial independence and security. And so here is where Wealth Protection Research comes in. They are armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research isn't a financial advisory firm. They're basically defenders of free speech. They're committed to giving a voice to the silence. So Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts, and these are the voices that challenge the prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report, and it highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into this zany 2024 election. It contains ideas that, the mainstream media isn't going to touch, and you can get it completely free by texting the word ideas to 76626. If you believe, as I do, in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, do this now. Text the word ideas, IDEAS, to 76626. You will get a free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we hear, to get the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle. But of course you can. And to take back control of our financial destinies, text ideas to 76626 to claim your free copy right now. My daughter and I were driving through town the other day and saw a very obviously a male walking around in women's clothes, which I don't care, but I was confused because he wasn't shaven, he was just wearing the women's clothes. It wasn't like he was presenting fully as an average female, a la Dylan Mulvaney. And my daughter kind of saw it. She's 15, and she looked at me and she said, huh, does he want to be a woman or does he want to be a man? Either way, I don't really care. Like you said, it's if he wants to do that. But when you then impose yourself on my daughter's ability to compete, I interviewed recently a young woman who's a skateboarder, competitive skateboarder, who had money and prizes and status taken away by a male skateboarder who just showed up, said, I identify as female, and was able to compete and took first prize. So this to me is one of those common sense issues that I just don't understand how anyone can see it another way when you're talking about fairness. How does this issue play among people that you see on a day-to-day basis?
It's overwhelmingly positive. More than 80% of the American people, so including a lot of people on the political left, believe this agenda, the transgender agenda, has gone too far. When we're very careful, as we ought to be about any human person, to say our sort of political or policy analysis has nothing to do with the dignity of a human person. Every single human on this planet, regardless of their politics, regardless of whatever their situation is, has the same dignity as the rest of us. When we talk in those terms, we're not only being virtuous, and I would argue, being Christian, we're also being American. That's what I meant earlier when I said Americans are just very tolerant and forgiving people. But when someone who has a lifestyle, a behavior that isn't just out of the mainstream, but also, if foisted on the rest of us, is very dangerous, Americans start drawing the line. Mm-hmm. So I think about the story that you just mentioned with your daughter. I think about stories that Riley Gaines and Paula Scanlon, both of them, very famous, accomplished collegiate swimmers, have told me directly about being in a locker room with a man. I mean, I would like to think that the most politically left of center person would just find that to be an affront because of the dignity of women. And then when Americans realize that the Biden-Harris administration has initiated a complete overhaul of Title IX, which is one of the great achievements in protecting equality and fairness in women. As a dad, as a brother of two sisters, one of whom is a very serious athlete, I just find that personally affronting. That's why over 80% of the Americans say enough is enough. And so we really ought to be optimistic about the political impact of this. And if Mr. Trump and Mr. Vance and other common sense candidates are wise, they would be talking about that more to explain how radical this agenda is.
Final question for you. We are coming up on the Democrat National Convention in Chicago. It's probably going to look very different now that Kamala Harris is the presumptive nominee rather than Joe Biden. And I would imagine it's going to be star-studded. We know we're hearing about, performers that are going to be there, that she's gotten Beyonce's backing to use her song Freedom. So there will naturally be a bump out of this, I would guess, unless the whole thing goes haywire. What are you expecting out of that convention? Will it be a similar bump to what we saw with the RNC? And then gosh darn it, I get whiplash from the news cycle lately. So just as quickly as there can be a bump, there can be a valley, right?
Yeah, two things. I expect a lot of fluff and no conversation about policy, a lot of demonizing of everyday, regular Americans. And I think to the extent that those of us who are focused on policy can be emphasizing policy achievements of policymakers who are conservatives and the utter failure in terms of policy of President Biden and Vice President Harris, the better. But the second thing is, to your kind of political question, there might be a little bit of a bump, but I mean, I can tell you, although I'm not into making predictions anymore, I'm a historian, not a soothsayer about the future. I think the fundamentals of this election are largely set. It looks like the Trump-Vance ticket is slightly ahead. I happen to know they're running like they're 10 points behind, which any politician should. I think when you get past Labor Day, a couple weeks after the DNC, Michelle, you're going to see a real emphasis on the border, on the economy, on public safety. And I think the home stretch of the campaign is going to be policy oriented. There will no doubt be unexpected things domestically and internationally, hopefully nothing that's really serious or evil. But I do think that policy contrast will acquit the common sense candidates really well, and I expect them to be talking about it.
Public safety, you and I didn't even touch on it. It is a very big albatross around the neck of Kamala Harris, as she has been in favor of defunding the police and congratulated cities that did that. It is so great to have you, PhD, Doctor, President of Heritage Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts. It's great to see you, and I hope we can do it again. I always end my conversations with my guests by saying, be brave and do good. So I would suggest to people that you be brave when people throw at you this Project 2025. Don't let them demonize it, and do good. And you know what? Just look a liberal in the face and say, have a great day.
Amen. You're the best, Michelle. This was fun.